Let's plant some blueberries. Blueberries are one of my favoriteest berries. I said what I said, favoriteest. And it's also one of the easiest to grow because they can be grown across a wide variety of areas and climates. It all comes down to type and variety. So how do you go about choosing the right blueberry plants for where you live? Some fruits, like blueberries, require a certain amount of chill hours to actually perform well. And chill hours are hours where temperatures are between 32 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit, specifically during a plant's dormancy period. Chill hours are important to plants like blueberries because it actually breaks a plant's dormancy period and triggers bud break, flowering, and then eventually fruiting. So your next question is probably, well, okay, that's great, but how do I actually figure out what my chill hours are? Well, for some areas, it can be as easy as simply typing in your zip code in Google and then putting chill hours. However, if that doesn't work, you can reach out to your local extension office and ask them what their average chill hours are for your area. It's also important to understand that depending on where you live, the average amount of chill hours may vary from county to county. And not to be Captain Obvious here, but when selecting blueberry varieties, you want to select varieties that have a chilling requirement that falls within the range of your average chill hours. There are 5 main types of blueberries. There's low bush, half high, northern high bush, southern high bush, and rabbit eye. As the name would suggest, low bush varieties are typically smaller and grow closer to the ground and typically don't get larger than 24 inches tall. They also have more of a spreading habit via underground rhizomes. They have strong cold hardiness and are better suited for colder climates. Low bush varieties are not self-fertile, so require cross-pollination by either another low bush variety or high bush variety. The ideal growing zones range between zones 3 and 6. Low bush blueberries are considered high chill and typically have an average chill hour requirement that ranges between 800 and 1,000 chill hours. There are several low bush varieties to choose from, but here are a few examples. Half high is a cross between high bush and low bush. Similar to low bush, they are extremely cold hardy and are best grown in cold climates. They have a compact growth habit and typically don't grow taller than 6 feet. They are self-fertile, however, they will produce much higher yields when cross-pollinated with another variety. The ideal growing zones range from 3 to 5. Like low bush, they are considered high chill and have an average chill hour requirement of between 800 and 1,000 chill hours. Here are a few examples of half high varieties. Northern high bush is the most commonly grown both commercially and for home growers. It has strong disease resistance, it's cold hardy, and is best suited for cooler climates. Northern high bush have a bush-like growth habit and can grow up to 12 feet tall. Northern high bush is self-fertile, but again will produce larger yields when cross-pollinated with another variety. The ideal growing zones range from 4 through 7. And just like low bush and half high, northern high bush has an average chill hour requirement ranging between 800 and 1,000 chill hours. There are tons of northern high bush varieties, but here are just a few. Southern high bush is a cross between northern high bush and species of blueberries native to the south. They have a bush-like growth habit and can get up to 10 feet tall. They have strong disease resistance and are tolerant to both heat and humidity. They tend to be a bit more sensitive to prolonged frost and freezes and are best suited for warmer climates. Most southern high bush are self-fertile, but you know the drill. You'll get higher yields when cross-pollinated with a different variety of southern high bush. The ideal growing zone for southern high bush range between zone 7 and 10. Southern high bush are considered low chill and have an average chill hour requirement ranging from 200 to 500 chill hours. These are a few examples of varieties of southern high bush. Rabbit eyes thrive in climates with hot summers and mild winters. They are best suited for warm climates. They have a bush-like growth habit. However, they actually get taller than high bush and can grow up to 15 feet tall. Rabbit eyes are not self-fertile. In fact, it's actually best to grow at least 3 different varieties of rabbit eyes to ensure proper cross-pollination and to maximize yields. It's important to note that rabbit eyes can only be cross-pollinated with other varieties of rabbit eyes. The ideal growing zones range from 7 and 9. Rabbit eyes are also considered low chill and have an average chill hour requirement ranging from 200 to 600 chill hours. And here are a few examples of varieties of rabbit eye. Which type you need to plant is going to largely depend on your growing zone as well as the overall climate of where you live. Now, blueberries, they picky. at least when it comes to their soil. Blueberries require acidic soil to perform well. This means the ideal pH for blueberries are between 4 and 5.5. If you're planting your blueberries in containers like me, you're likely using a potting mix, which typically has a pH range of around neutral. However, if you're not sure, or maybe you're planting in ground, you're going to want to give your planting media a pH test. However, no worries, this is a lot easier than it sounds. There are things like pH probes, pH test kits that are readily available and relatively inexpensive. I'll leave some links below to ones I've used in the past and have had great success with. And so your next question might be, well, how do I actually get my planting media to that ideal pH? Well, there are a few options. You can actually amend your soil with things like soil sulfur or soil acidifiers. So if you are going to be using a soil sulfur or a soil acidifier, it's best to prep your soil ahead of actually planting your blueberries several weeks to several months in advance. However, I ain't do that. There's also something called fast acting sulfur, and this works within minutes to start to acidify your soil. Another option is just to buy a potting mix that's formulated for acid-loving plants and that's already acidic. It's important to check the pH of your blueberries not only at the time of planting, but every few months just to make sure it stays within that optimal pH range. And if it falls above 5.5, you're going to want to amend it with some type of soil acidifier. While blueberries need their planting media to be able to retain a certain amount of moisture, they don't like wet feet, meaning they don't like the planting media to hold on to too much water for too long to the point that they get waterlogged. This means that whatever planting media you use needs to be well draining. So the ideal planting media for blueberries, well, in the wild, it's probably like described as a sandy loamy mix. So the ideal planting media for blueberries, outside of being acidic, is full of organic material, is well draining, but is able to hold on to moisture, but not too much. Easy, right? Blueberries have fairly shallow root systems that are incredibly fibrous. However, blueberries don't have what's called root hairs. And root hairs helps plants uptake the maximum amount of nutrients. Because of this, blueberries aren't heavy feeders and can actually struggle if they're planted in overly enriched soil or they're over fertilized. Because of this, I actually don't apply a granular fertilizer at the time of planting. Instead, I will amend the planting media with tons of compost, and I'll even top it off with some composted chicken manure, a cow manure, with a layer of mulch. And this serves my plants just fine. And then every few months, I'll top it off with a well-balanced, slow-release fertilizer. Blueberries are incredibly sensitive to salt. High salt levels actually impedes the plant's roots' abilities to uptake the proper amount of water. High salt levels can also cause things like leaf burn, and it will drastically reduce, if not halt altogether, production of berries on your plants. And if your plants do produce fruit, the quality of fruit is likely to be subpar. If you are going to be using chemical fertilizers, you want to be mindful of this because chemical fertilizers tend to have high salt content, especially when compared to organic alternatives. When buying blueberries, you're either going to buy them as a bare roots or as potted plants. Now, bare roots are just what they sound. They are the plant that has been dug up with the roots exposed. It's usually packed in some type of package with either peat moss or coconut coir or maybe a little bit of both. If you're at a big box store and you're buying your plants like in aisle inside, these are likely bare roots. And it's also obvious if the plant isn't in a pot, it's likely bare root. If you are going to be buying a bare root plant, you want to make sure it's alive. Well, how do you do that? This plant is obviously alive because it is nice and green, but the same applies. What you're going to do is you are going to gently try to bend the branch, and if it's pliable, then you're good. However, if you try to bend it and it snaps, it's dead, and walk away. Potted plants also, it's like the name implies, the plant is in a pot. And I found that when I buy potted plants, the plants just sort of take off faster because the roots have already had a jump start because they're already in some type of growing media. However, I have had great success growing both types. Bare roots are typically a lot less expensive. However, they'll just take a lot more time to get up and running. So I have a lot of plants that I need to pot up in containers. And so rather than do everything individually, I'm just going to create a massive batch of my potting mix recipe. And in each container for each plant, I'm going to amend it based on the needs of the plant. For my blueberries, I'm going to be amending my potting mix with some perlite. Since this potting mix uses coconut coir as a base and coconut coir holds on to an incredible amount of water, the perlite is going to improve overall drainage. It's also going to help wick water away so that the mix doesn't hold on to too much water. Next, I'm adding a fast-acting sulfur to acidify the soil according to the manufacturer's instructions. When handling sulfur, be sure to wear gloves. This stuff turns into acid. Next, I'm watering the mix in very thoroughly to help activate the sulfur. This is also a great time to check your container to make sure it has good drainage. I let the mix drain for about an hour or so just so that it wasn't soft and wet when I went to plant my blueberries. Today I'm planting a southern high bush called Biloxi. I like to place the pot in the container just to get an idea of how big of a hole I need to dig. If planting a potted plant, you want to plant to the soil line of the potted plant. Wow, that was a tongue twister. As you're planting, remember to gently press down to remove any air pockets. Here you can see it made a vast difference in terms of how much soil was actually covering the plant. Next, I'm adding a layer of good old composted chicken manure to act as a mild, slow-release fertilizer. And now we mulch. And mulch is even more so important for blueberries because they have such a shallow root system. It's going to do a few things. First, it's going to suppress weeds that might otherwise rob the blueberry of key nutrients. Second, it's going to mitigate the amount of water that evaporates after watering. This is especially important during the summer. Third, it's going to insulate the roots and mitigate the impact of fluctuations in temperature that might otherwise stress or even damage the plant. And for some bonus tips, fall and early spring are typically the best times to plant blueberries. Specifically fall for warmer climates and early spring for cooler climates. When selecting varieties for cross-pollination, you want to ensure that they will be in bloom around the same time. Otherwise, it kind of defeats the purpose. If you have the space, you can extend your season by selecting varieties with a broad range of ripening times. And you can give yourself free plants by simply multiplying them by taking cuttings and propagating. If you're repotting or transplanting potted plants, it's best to do so before the plant starts to flower and especially before it starts to fruit. Not doing so may stress the plant out and send it into transplant shock and therefore cause it to drop its flowers or its fruit. Groceries expensive. And with no relief in sight, I hope you start to get motivated to start your gardening journey and start to grow your own food. I know the thought of this can sometimes seem overwhelming, especially if you've never gardened before, you don't have a backyard, and maybe you just live in an apartment with the balcony. Remember, these things take time and you don't have to do everything all at once. It could be as simple as just starting a container or two with a few of your favorite herbs and being able to supplement small portions of your groceries at a time. And along the way, you are sure to have failures. I know I have, and any gardener who tells you they haven't, lying. The key is not to be discouraged. Continue to learn and keep trying. And y'all already know the deal. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. And remember, every black thumb ripens the green, and it all just starts with a seed.